It's hard to scroll online lately without seeing some version of this claim. Big investors are buying up all the homes. And honestly, if you're a home buyer who's lost out on a few offers, that idea probably sounds believable. When homes are expensive and competition is tight, it's easy to assume these giant companies are scooping everything up behind the scenes. But here's the thing, what people assume is happening and what the data actually shows aren't always the same. Let's look at what's really happening with large institutional investors in today's housing market, because the numbers tell a much different story than the headlines. So let's start with the most important stat. According to John Burns Research and Consulting, large institutional investors, which means those that own 100 or more homes, made up just 1.2% of all home purchases in quarter three of 2025, as shown in this graph. That's it. Out of every 100 homes sold, only one went to a large institutional investor. And here's an important point that often gets missed. That level of investor activity is very much in line with historical norms. It's not unusually high, and it's actually well below the recent peak of 3.1% back in 2022, which itself was still a small share of the overall market. So while it can feel like big investors are everywhere nationally, they're a very small part of the overall home sales. Why investor activity gets so much attention? There are two main reasons this topic gets so much attention. Number one, investor activity isn't spread evenly. Investors are more active in certain markets, which can make competition feel intense for home buyers that are in those areas. As Lance Lambert, the co-founder of Resi Club, explains, on a national level, large investors, those owning at least 100 single-family homes, only own around 1% of total single-family housing stock. That said, in a handful of regional housing markets, institutional and large single-family landlords have a much larger presence. Number two, investor is a broad term. Part of what makes the share of purchases bought by investors sound so big is because many headlines lump all the large Wall Street institutions together with the small local investors, like your neighbor who owns one or two rental homes. But those are very different buyers. In reality, most investors are small, local owners, not massive corporations. And when all investors get grouped together in the headline as a single stat, it inflates the number and makes it look like big institutions are dominating the market, even though they're not. Yes, big investors exist. Yes, they buy homes, but nationally, they're responsible for a very small share of the total purchases, far smaller than most people assume. The bigger challenges around affordability have much more to do with the supply and demand and years of underbuilding than with large institutions competing against everyday buyers. That's why it's so important to separate noise from reality, especially if you're trying to decide if now is the right time to move. So the bottom line, if you want to talk through what investor activity actually looks like in our local market, specifically maybe your neighborhood, and how it impacts your options or doesn't, let's connect. Sometimes a little context makes all the difference. This is Leanne Parrington with Keller Williams Vestavia. I look forward to talking with you.